Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And These Are Your Stories. So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Stories and Other Stuff.
What does that mean?
Well, life is funny. Sometimes the dumbest things you do turn out to be the smartest.
Oh good, does that mean we're not playing a mystery today?
No, it does not.
Who's that at the electric organ, Al? Oh, that's Keen Brown, Mike. I find it cheaper to hire him to play fill-in music than a full band. What do you do for entertainment when he's off the platform? There's a portable record player underneath the piano. Oh, yeah, I see it. We play dance music on it when Keen knocks off for intermission periods. Okay, Al, I'm sold. This cabaret of yours looks like a sound proposition. I'll buy in. Swell, Mike. I'll be back in just a few minutes. The contract's in my office. Okay, that's it. Hey, the lights have gone out. There's an emergency switch in my office. I'll turn it on. Be back in a second.
I'm Keen Brown. You wanted to see me?
Yes, Mr. Brown. My name's Mike Evans. I'm just checking up on a few facts until the police get here.
Sure. What can I do to help?
This was payroll night for the employees here, wasn't it?
Yeah, Al usually paid us off after closing.
You won't get paid tonight, Mr. Brown. Look at the safe. I'm not a detective, but it doesn't take an experienced eye to spot this whole thing as an inside job.
How do you figure that out?
Someone working here knew that Al had the weekly payroll in his office safe tonight. And only someone who was completely familiar with this cabaret would know the location of the light box.
Then all you have to do, Mr. Evans, is to establish the position of every employee at the time Al was shot.
That's right. Suppose I start with you.
Me?
No objections, I hope. After all, you've been here long enough to know how to turn off the electrical system for the entire building or to tell someone how to do it.
Are you accusing me?
No, I'm simply asking you where you were at the time the shot was fired.
You know where I was. I was on the stand playing my electric organ so there wouldn't be any panic.
That's right, I did hear you playing.
Correct, the first time. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I've had enough of your amateur detective work.
And there's nothing further you can do to help me?
Nothing, except to call a policeman and get this murder solved.
That won't be necessary, Mr. Brown. I know who the murderer is.
Really? Who?
You, Mr. Brown. You made your own confession. How does Mike Evans know that Keen Brown is the murderer? In just a moment, we'll know, but first...
Well, I think they got the wrong guy.
Oh, I quite agree. We all heard the organ being played while the murder was committed.
Yep, and you can't be in two places at once.
Well, that's not quite true. With some time-space manipulation, one could open a black hole. For a brief moment, you could inhabit two physical spaces.
I hadn't thought about that.
It is not surprising. I am constantly amazed at your lack of thought on anything.
Oh, good one.
And now, back to our story. Brown, you admitted that the important clue in this case was to find where every employee of this cabaret was at the time the shot was fired. You claim to have been on the stand playing your electric organ. I heard the music, but whether I heard you, I don't know. I believe I heard your music coming from a record on the player beneath the electric organ. You couldn't have been playing at the time the lights were out because the whole electrical system had been sabotaged. And to play an electric organ, you need electricity. Your speaker has to be plugged into an outlet. Right, I suppose? Brown, let's take up your suggestion. I'll call the police. There's been a murder.
Okay, BG, I have a problem with the solution.
Oh, enlighten me.
The organ ran on electricity, yes?
That's right.
What, I wonder, does the record player and loudspeaker run on?
One would think electrical current.
One would think.
Oh, I see your point.
What's that you say?
Hello and welcome to the podcast. On the show today, we have some amazing stories.
That bad, huh?
We travel through time to kill the great Albert Einstein. We have a story from Brett about his encounter with some orbs. Professor C. Cydwick Ohms tells us about his one-way door. And on our amazing stories, you will hear the tragic tale of the Steamboat Sultana. Now, if all that sounds pretty good, hang around. But first, here is our audiobook review. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Audible has sponsored the show now since July of 2019. We have reviewed more than 140 audiobooks, and the list keeps growing. Did you know that Audible has over 200,000 books available? And a lot of those are included in the free catalog. Audible is amazing, and it is the perfect companion to Ron's Amazing Stories. If you like this podcast, you're going to love Audible. So what am I listening to? Armada, a novel by Ernest Cline and narrated by Will Wheaton. Now, first off, let me just say that I love any audiobook narrated by Will. You might have hated his character Wesley Crusher on Star Trek The Next Generation, but his skill as a reader, well, that's never in question. Secondly, any book written by Ernest, in earnest, is gonna be great. He wrote Ready Player One and Ready Player Two. Two incredibly good science fiction stories that one of them even made the big screen. So, what is Armada about? Zach Lightman has never cared much for reality. He vastly prefers the countless science fiction movies, books, and video games he spent his life consuming. And all too often, he catches himself wishing that some fantastic, impossible, world-altering event would arrive and whisk him off on a grand spacefaring adventure. Now, before we get to the meat of this story, here is a clip from the beginning of the book that introduces Zach and some of the backstory.
I parked in the empty driveway and killed the engine, but I didn't get out of the car right away. Instead, I sat there gripping the wheel with both hands, peering silently up at the attic window of our little ivy-covered brick house, thinking about the first time I'd gone up there to dig through my father's old possessions. I'd felt like a young Clark Kent, preparing to finally learn the truth about his origins from the holographic ghost of his own long-dead father. But now I was thinking of a young Jedi in training named Luke Skywalker, looking into the mouth of that cave on Dagobah, while Master Yoda told him about today's activity lesson.
Strong with the dark side of the Force, that place is. In you must go, mofo.
So in I went. When I unlocked the front door of our house and stepped into the living room, Muffet, our ancient beagle, glanced up at me sleepily from where he was stretched out on the rug. A few years earlier, he would have been waiting for me just inside the door, yapping like a madman, but the poor guy had now grown so old and deaf that my arrival barely woke him. Muffet rolled onto his back, and I gave his tummy a few quick rubs before heading upstairs. The old dog watched me go, but didn't follow. When I finally reached the attic door, I just stood there at the top of the stairs with one hand on the doorknob. I didn't open the door. I didn't go in, not right away. First, I needed a moment to prepare myself. His name was Xavier Ulysses Lightman, and he died when he was only 19 years old. I was still just a baby at the time, so I didn't remember him. Growing up, I'd always told myself that was lucky, because you can't miss someone you don't even remember. But the truth was I did miss him, and I'd attempted to fill the void created by his absence with data, by absorbing every scrap of information about him that I could. Sometimes it felt like I was trying to earn the right to miss him with the same intensity my mom and his parents had always seemed to. When I was around 10 years old, I entered what I thought of now as my GARP phase. That was when my lifelong curiosity about my late father gradually blossomed into a full-blown obsession. Up until that point, I'd made do with a vague, idealized image of my young father that had gradually formed in my mind over the years. But in actuality, I really only knew 4 basic facts about him, the same 4 things I'd heard over and over again throughout my childhood, mostly from my grandparents. 1. I looked just like him when he was, insert my current age. 2. He had loved me and my mother very much. 3. He died in an on-the-job accident at the local wastewater treatment plant. 4. The accident supposedly wasn't his fault. But once my age reached double digits, these vague details were no longer sufficient to satisfy my growing curiosity about him. So, naturally, I began to barrage his widow with questions. Daily. Incessantly. At the time, I was too young and clueless to realize how painful it was for my mother to be endlessly interrogated about her dead husband by his 10-year-old clone. No, my self-involved ass couldn't seem to connect those glowing neon dots, so I kept right on asking questions, and my mother, trooper that she was, answered them to the best of her ability for as long as she could. Then one day she handed me a small brass key and told me about the boxes up in our attic. Until then, I'd always assumed that my mother had donated all of my dad's stuff to charity after he died, because that seemed like the first thing a young, widowed single mother who was trying to start her life over would do. But that summer day, my mother explained that this was not the case. Instead, she had packed everything he'd owned into cardboard boxes. And when we moved into our current house a few months later, purchased with the payout from the accident settlement, she'd stored all of them up in our attic. She had done this for me, she said, so that when I grew up and wanted to know more about my father, those boxes would be up there waiting for me. When I finally got the door unlocked and burst into the attic, they were really there. A dozen pristine cardboard moving boxes stacked neatly in a corner beneath the sloping rafters, illuminated by a bright shaft of sunlight. For a long time, all I could do was stand there frozen, staring at this tower of time capsules, waiting for me to unlock their secrets. I'd spent the rest of the summer up in that attic, sorting through it all like an archaeologist unearthing relics in an ancient tomb. It took some time. For a guy who had only made it to the age of 19, my dad had managed to amass an awful lot of stuff. About a third of the boxes were filled with my father's collection of old video games, which was actually more of a hoard than a collection. He'd owned 5 different video game consoles, along with hundreds of games for each of them. I found the real stockpile, however, on his old PC, which contained thousands of classic arcade and console video game emulators and ROM files, more games than one person could have possibly played in a single lifetime. My father appeared to have given it a shot, though.
Now, while that clip is interesting, it doesn't represent what the book is really about. As I mentioned, Zach's head is mostly in the clouds. So when he sees a flying saucer, he's sure that his years of escapism have finally tripped him into madness. Especially since the alien ship that he's staring at is straight out of his favorite video game, a flight simulator called Armada, in which gamers just happen to be protecting Earth from alien invaders. As impossible as it seems, what Zach is seeing is all too real. And it's just the first in a blur of revelations that will force him to question everything he thought he knew about Earth's history, its future, and even his own life. And now he's forced to play the hero for real, with our humanity in the balance. Armada is a rollicking, surprising thriller, a coming-of-age adventure, and an invasion tale like nothing you've ever heard before. Now, if that appeals to you, head to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can have Armada for free. Here is what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook in 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This also gains you access to the included catalog, which is updated constantly with new titles. So to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Thank you, Audible. And now it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
This story is one of my favorite types. I've always had a fascination for the floating orb. I'm of the opinion that in most cases, these are life forms. Others suggest that they are alien encounters, and still others think that these are spirits of the departed. Whether they are ghosts, aliens, or cryptids, they are a lot of fun. This story is a real head-scratcher and was sent in by Brett Dixon from Mobile, Alabama. Brett writes, Ron, I'm not sure if this is a UFO story or something else. You've been asking for UFO tales, and this is the closest I have. I hope you like it. I call this story The DeSoto Orbs. This happened last summer while on vacation in DeSoto State Park. Some of Alabama's most beautiful scenery can be found in the eastern part of the state. The park is renowned for its wildflowers and rushing waterfalls. One of the tallest in the state is DeSoto Falls, which comes in at 107 feet high. The park is also popular for climbing, biking, and hiking. My wife Amy and I were camping there and decided to visit the falls at night. I wanted to do some time-lapse photography and picked a night where the moon was full and the skies were clear. To say it was the perfect night does not begin to describe it. We set up the equipment and began shooting the falls at various locations. Since we were using a combination of digital and film, we knew already that we were getting some fantastic shots. I can send you a few if you want. On one of the photos, we noticed a streak of light running across the picture from side to side. Neither of us remembered any light crossing the scene as we took the picture. But there it was, bright white and orange. We looked for the source of the phenomenon, but came up empty. We decided that it was some kind of firefly. After all, lightning bugs are pretty common in Alabama. We set back to work when Amy whispered for me to look up. I lifted my head up in time to see 3 orange orbs disappear into the falls, only to pop back out of the water a few feet from where we were set up. They came towards us slowly, and I was quick to grab my camera to capture a picture. They stopped a few inches from Amy and began to slowly move around her. I was stunned for a moment, but managed to lift the camera to take the photo. As I looked through the viewfinder, I couldn't see the orbs. I lowered the camera and they were still there. I took a few pictures before they flew off and disappeared back into the falls. We never saw them again that night. Later, I looked at the pictures I did take. They were horribly out of focus and showed no signs of our Orbish visitors. Brett Dixon, Mobile, Alabama. Well, Brett, that is one of the best orb stories that we've had on this show. Similar to others, but yet totally unique. That behavior seems to support my theory that orbs are a life form of some sort, and hey, may even be related to the firefly. Thank you for sharing your story, and please do send me some of your pictures. This next story was sent in by Candace in New York. I make it no secret that one of my favorite things about the podcast is when people send in their stories about where they listen to the show. Here is an answer from Candace. Hello, Ron. I wanted to tell you my story, which will probably sound made up. Things like this don't happen in real life. I started following you back in 2012. I'm not sure when. I'm ashamed to admit that I do fall behind and let the shows pile up. A lot. That turned out to be a good thing. A few winters back, my husband and I were asked to take care of a summer home for a friend. It would mean being snowed in for several months, but we would have outside communication. That is, if the line stayed up and the dish stayed in the tree. Neither worked out, and we lost everything other than shortwave radio. Sound like a Stephen King novel? We got pretty bored up there while we waited for the repair crews to fix things up. We decided to make Ron's Amazing Stories a nightly event until the stories ran out, which, by some amazing coincidence, happened at the same time as the cable and power were restored. Thank you for your show. You are a lifesaver. Candace and Mike. Well, Candace, thank you for your story, and I love to hear things like this, but I am sorry that I had a captive audience. I would like to add, I hope you at least had some good podcasts to listen to. Back in 2012, I was still trying to figure things out. Someday, I hope to get all this podcast stuff down. Thank you again for your story. If you want to hear your story on Ron's Amazing Stories, please let me know. All you have to do is go to ronsamazingstories.com, click on the story submission banner, and type in your information or story. If you leave your information, I will contact you and we can get together and I will write your story for you. If you want to write your story, then please do, and I will use it if I can. So, I want to thank everyone that did send in a story today. You guys are the best. Our featured story comes from the OTR series X-1 and is titled Target 1. It first appeared in Galaxy magazine and was written by Frederik Pohl. It is a time travel piece. In the 1950s, science fiction was plagued with stories about moving through time. There were two main theories. One is that even if you were able to travel through time, you wouldn't be able to change the future. The second is that it would be possible to change the future, but fate would find a way to reestablish the timeline. What do you think? Today's story just might help you decide. It is titled Target 1, and it first aired on December 26, 1957.
Countdown for blast off. X-5, 4, 3, 2, X-1, fire. From the far horizons of the unknown come tales of new dimensions in time and space. These are stories of a future, adventures in which you'll live in a million, could be years, on 1,000 maybe worlds. The National Broadcasting Company, in cooperation with Galaxy Science Fiction Magazine, presents
X minus 1.
Tonight, Target 1. But first, hear this. The presents have been opened, the gifts enjoyed, and in the case of the kids, a few are already slightly battered. But NBC has one more holiday package for you, and it'll be delivered over this weekend on Monitor. There'll be the music of such bands as those of Guy Lombardo and Richard Maltby, punctuated by the antic commentary of Monitor's own Bob and Ray and Fibber McGee and Molly, and underscored by the up-to-the-minute reports of NBC's newsmen at home and abroad. From Friday night through Sunday midnight, Monitor will bring you another weekend of drama, music, news, and interviews. Of special interest to sports fans will be NBC's coverage of the Friday night fights, Saturday's blue-gray and north-south football games, and Sunday's National Football League championship game. Use and enjoy Monitor, your weekend radio service. Yes, start your weekend right with Monitor on Friday nights, and stay with Monitor all weekend long over most of these same NBC stations. Now, X-1 and tonight's story, Target 1.
Headquarters of the World Council was in the ruined United Nations building in New York. It took me an hour to reach it, picking my way across the red-colored rubble that had once been a proud city. I was ushered into the office of the president of the council, a former Russian scientist named Melkov. It was hard to realize that only a few decades ago, these people had helped us destroy the world in an atomic war that left less than 100,000 people on the face of the globe.
Come in. Dr. Marin.
Yes.
It's good to see you, Doctor.
Sorry I'm 2 days late. I had to land at Boston. It's the only airport operating.
I understand. You want to sit down?
Thank you.
I suppose you are wondering what this is all about.
Very little surprises me, Mr. President.
Good. As you know, Doctor, the Great War of 1960 left very little of the human race. What it did leave, well, 2 billion corpses, 3 continents rotting and unlivable, and every survivor mutating. I believe you yourself have had children who could scarcely be called human. Sorry to be so blunt.
Why did you send for me, Mr. President?
Doctor, suppose I gave you an opportunity to do something extremely practical.
Such as?
A chance to prevent the destruction of our world, which took place 30 years ago.
To prevent what has happened? To stop an atomic war?
Yes. Would you do it?
I'd sell my soul to the devil, Mr. President.
You mean that?
Yes.
Doctor, what would you say was the most important scientific discovery of the 20th century?
I suppose Einstein's equation. E equals mc squared.
Exactly. This formula unlocked the atom. Without it, there would have been no atomic energy, and consequently, no bomb, no war.
The formula did not cause the war, Mr. President, nor did the man who discovered it. He was one of the finest human beings who ever lived. A man utterly dedicated to the pursuit of peace and harmony.
Yes, exactly. That is what will make your task so abhorrent, Doctor.
What is this task, Mr. President?
Quite simply, it is the murder of Albert Einstein.
Are you insane?
Perhaps. Only history will record that.
But how in the name of heaven Albert Einstein died in 1956?
I am well aware of that. In order to commit this murder, Doctor, you will have to travel back in time
travel back. You mean that...
I mean that our scientists have succeeded in their experiments. Parachronon penetration has been achieved.
It's fantastic.
Yes, so were atomic energy and rockets to the moon and radio waves long before both of those.
You're actually suggesting that I return to the early 20th century to commit a murder?
Yes.
But why Einstein? Why not the men who took his contributions and twisted them into ghastly inhuman weapons? Why not them?
Because others would replace them. There are many minds so filled with contempt for their own lives that they would be willing to destroy others, so warped with hate that they might even enjoy the job. No, it must be Einstein.
Well, then why me? Why not select some murderer, some fiend?
Because you are a man of the highest morality. This task must not be performed by some twisted monster. It must be done by a man of integrity who fully realizes his responsibility. To do otherwise would be to degrade ourselves and our victim. Come here, to the window. Do you see that covered barge lying in the East River?
Yes.
That barge is the finest laboratory we could assemble. Inside it is the mechanism for complete K-meson penetration, maintaining a stable configuration. In effect, it is a floating time machine.
You've tested it?
It was tested last week. Professor Milton Waxman went back 40 years in time and returned. We cannot afford another test because our energy sources are limited.
Will Waxman accompany me?
Yes. He and one other. Well, Doctor, what is your answer?
All right. I'll do it. That afternoon, I was taken aboard the barge in the East River. I was left alone in the laboratory to wait for Waxman, a physicist who knew how to operate the chronosphere. Waxman, who is this?
His name is John. John, this is Dr. Charles Moran.
I know the doctor.
I don't believe we've met.
In my business, I have to know a lot of people I've never met.
John is security.
I see.
He's going with us.
To see there's no mistake.
That's right, Doctor.
Very well. I don't suppose murderers can be choosy about their companions.
Before we go any further, here are some clothes that will be suitable to the time and place which is our destination. Please put them on, Doctor.
While you're changing, I'll give you some background on the subject. Born Ulm, Germany, 1879. German citizen, religion Jewish. Became a Swiss citizen after graduation from Zurich Polytechnical Institution. Later migrated to the United States after Adolf Hitler came to power, with a price set on his head by the Nazis. Nobel Prize for Physics, 1921. Copley Medal, 1925. Franklin, 1935. Personal habits...
Must we do this?
He's only doing his job. Go on, John.
Personal habits. Works in a bare room with only a pencil and paper. Enjoys sailing, smokes a pipe, never drinks, is a violinist of comfortability.
All right, I'm ready.
Good. Now just strap yourself into the accelerator seat. Ready? Switch on. The sensation will be something akin to weightlessness, a disorientation and feeling of utter detachment. This will last until we have settled into a new orbital configuration. We will be able to monitor our time segment on the screen before us.
May I ask our objective?
Yes. The Polytechnicum at Zurich. Graduation ceremony in the year 1900.
So young.
He was already formulating the theory of relativity at this point, Doctor. We have no choice. It must be clean and thorough. Are you ready, gentlemen?
Yes.
Ready, Professor.
Hold on. We will begin to whirl until we reach speeds where K-meson penetration is possible. Now.
The sensation was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I felt bodiless, weightless. My consciousness seemed to float free. I was dimly aware of Waxman at the monitoring controls, but otherwise I remember no sensation. Later he told me that it took exactly 1/2 hour to vector in on the right time and place. That was right after the whirling stopped.
Marin, are you all right?
Yes, I think so.
John, I'm all right.
Where are we?
Well, according to the monitor, our barge is at a dockside on the Lake of Zurich. The year should be 1900. The time is 2 o'clock. We have exactly 1 hour to accomplish our mission. Open the hatchway, John. Well?
Fantastic. A different world.
We can't waste any time. The graduation ceremony is at 3. Now let's go.
Very well.
Just a moment, gentlemen. Here, take these.
What are they?
Guns. We'll need them.
We stepped ashore. It was strange to see the world green and happy again after our red radioactive ruins. Eventually, we located a policeman who spoke some English. He directed us to the auditorium of the Zurich Polytechnical Institute where the graduation ceremony was in progress.
Don't attract much attention. Take a seat in the rear.
And now, it gives me great pleasure to present the diplomas of graduation to the members of the graduating class of the Zurich Polytechnic Institute. First, Mr. Hans Kindler, cum laude.
Will you see him, John?
Not yet.
Next, Mr. Fritz.
We will have to wait until they call him to the platform.
Cum laude. Mr. Heinrich Weiss, valedictor.
Are you ready?
Miss Barbara Müller.
Marin, you're the one who must do this. Are you ready?
What? Oh, yes. Yes, I am. I'm ready.
Mr. Albert Einstein.
That's him. Marin, shoot. Shoot.
I can't do it. I can't.
Give me that gun. Come on. We've got to get out of the barge. Now hurry. Another few minutes.
What do you suppose it will be like?
What?
Our world, the one we left. Without atomic fission, I mean.
We'll soon know.
Well, one thing is for sure. There'll be no mass destruction. The people will be there.
The people. Good Lord, there'll be billions of them.
And the trees, the green shrubs, and the beautiful tall buildings. He looked very young.
We're vectoring in on our year. Now hang on when I start the negative penetration. Brace yourselves. According to calculations, we should be back in the East River on the same day we left. The world will be as it would have been if Einstein had never existed. Open the hatch, John. Look at that.
The city. New York is whole again. No ruins, no rubble.
Those buildings are magnificent. Look at the trees and the parks. Marin, we've done it. It was worth it. We've done it.
Yes, we've done it. Suddenly from nowhere, an official boat, a police boat. Suspicious of the barge and our parachronon penetration equipment, we were arrested by federal agents. The barge and our time machines confiscated. We were drugged, tortured, questioned interminably. It went on for what seemed like days and weeks. Finally, when they decided that they had had every shred of information we possessed, we were taken before a huge, beetle-browed man who seemed to be a combination scientist and civil authority.
Sit him down. Well, Dr. Marin, we seem to have exhausted the possibilities. Tell me, is there anything you and your companions wish to tell me before you're disposed of?
Disposed of?
A euphemism for murdered.
Murdered? Why, what have we done?
You haven't done anything yet, but you have a thorough knowledge of nuclear physics, fission reaction, hydrogen bombs, etc.
Lord, you mean you have the knowledge we tried to keep from you? You got it from us ourselves?
Don't flatter yourself, Doctor. We've known the principles of nuclear reaction ever since Cretchwood.
Cretchwood?
The Brazilian scientist, discoverer of the equation E equals mc squared.
I see. Then, why are you going to destroy us?
Because, my friend, you're too dangerous. You know too much. Information could leak to our enemies. Important principles.
Enemies?
Oh, yes, I forgot. You have no knowledge of contemporary affairs. Beneath this building, deep in the earth, there is a thorium pile going.
Thorium? Oh, U-235?
Yeah, would be better, yes. Our scientists are working that out. The problem of separation and so on. It's a highly secret project, naturally. We call it only by the name Manhattan Project.
Manhattan? Oh, no, it couldn't be. It's too coincidental. Yet I see it's true. You're going through exactly the same steps. In a year, you'll have an atom bomb. Then soon after, a hydrogen bomb. Then intercontinental missiles, and then...
You seem to have great powers of prophecy, as well as great scientific knowledge.
My friend, did you ever hear of a man named Einstein? Albert Einstein?
Einstein? No. I never heard of him.
Then the futility of it struck me. The futility of trying to place the guilt of all of us on any one man. The futility of trying to do something worthwhile by evil means. And finally, the futility of trying to murder an idea. As they led me to the execution cell, where I now wait, the words of a man whose books were destroyed in the war rang in my brain. The fault, dear Brutus, lies not with our stars, but with ourselves.
Fred Collins again. I'll have another word about X-1 in just a moment.
That how you feel, blue and miserable with a deep-down cold? Listen.
Every second someone takes it for the miseries of a cold. Millions more take bromoquinine. Every second someone takes it for the miseries of a cold. Bromoquinine.
More people have taken more bromoquinine cold tablets for more complete relief than any other cold tablet ever sold. You could use aspirin or cough syrups or nose drops all day and not get bromoquinine's relief. Bromoquinine works to relieve stopped-up nose, body aches, fever, irregularity, the blues, and headache, too. Yes, more complete relief for even virus colds. For bromoquinine is the only cold tablet sold with wonder-working quinine and 5 other medicines health-fortified with vitamin C. Remember,
every second someone takes it for the miseries of a cold. Millions more take bromoquinine.
Get bromoquinine brand cold tablets.
You have just heard X-1 presented by the National Broadcasting Company in cooperation with Galaxy Science Fiction Magazine, which this month features Kill Me with Kindness by Richard Wilson. What would you do if you found yourself in a place where your every whim was granted? Don't worry. You wouldn't be the first to spoil utopia by attempting to improve it. Galaxy Magazine, on your newsstand today. Tonight, X-1 has brought you Target 1, a story from the pages of Galaxy written by Frederik Pohl and adapted for radio by George Lefferts. Featured in our cast were Joseph Bell as Dr. Marin, Frank Silvera as President Malkov, Dean Almquist as Professor Voxman, Al Collins as Jom, Guy Rep as the official, with Charles Webster. This is Fred Collins speaking. X-1 was directed by George Boutsas and is an NBC Radio Network production.
So, according to our story today, it is possible to change the past, but the bottom line is man will still find a way to destroy himself. Bleak, but probably true. The writer of our story was Frederik Pohl. He was born November 26, 1919, and passed away September 2, 2013. His career spanned nearly 75 years. From his first published work, the 1937 poem, Elegy to a Dead Satellite, to his 2011 novel, All the Lives He Led. From about 1959 until 1969, Pohl edited Galaxy and won 3 successive annual Hugo Awards as the year's best professional magazine. With his personal works, he netted the John W. Campbell Memorial Award twice. He won a U.S. National Book Award in the Year 1 category of science fiction. He also won 4 Hugo Awards and 3 Nebula Awards, including receiving both for the 1977 novel Gateway. The Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America named Pohl its 12th recipient of the Damon Knight Memorial Grand Master Award in 1993. And then he was inducted by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame in 1998. Pohl was a special kind of man. He was able to transfix his audience, and his stories are as good today as they were 70 years ago. He's been about everything that it's possible to be in the field of science fiction, from fan and struggling poet to critic, literary agent, teacher, book and magazine editor, and above all, he was truly a great writer.
What's puzzling you, Ethelbert? One of those quizzes. And it says here, what are these men famous for? Sidney Porter, Samuel Clemens, Charles Dodgson.
Well, they're all great authors.
Well, how come I never heard of them?
Well, you would if they printed their pen names. They're O. Henry, Mark Twain, and Lewis Carroll.
Well, I'll be. Those names are famous. Everybody knows them.
Mm-hmm. Like everybody knows Anchor Hocking, the most famous name in glass.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a short story with some impact. It is titled Time for Texas and first appeared in Fantastic Universe magazine, November of 1956. It is read for us by Justin Daniels.
In one fell swoop, declared Professor C. Cydwick Ohms, releasing a thin blue ribbon of pipe smoke and rocking back on his heels, I intend to solve the greatest problem facing mankind today. Colonizing the polar wastes was a messy and fruitless business, and the enforced birth control program couldn't be enforced. Overpopulation still remains the thorn in our side. Gentlemen, he paused to look each of the assembled reporters in the eye, there is but one answer. Mass annihilation? Quavered a cub reporter. Posh boy, certainly not, the professor bristled. The answer is time. Time? Exactly, nodded Ohms. With a dramatic flourish, he swept aside a red velvet drape to reveal a tall structure of gleaming metal. As witness! Golly, what's that thing? Queried the cub. This thing, replied the professor acidly, is the C. Cydwick Ohms time door. Willikers, a time machine? Not so, not so. Please, boy. A time machine in the popular sense is impossible. Wild fancy. However, the professor tapped the dottle from his pipe, by a mathematically precise series of infinite calculations, I have developed the remarkable C. Cydwick Ohms time door. Open it, take but a single step, and presto, the past. But where in the past, Professor? Ohms smiled easily down at the tense ring of faces. Gentlemen, beyond this door lies the sprawling giant of the Southwest, enough land to absorb Earth's overflow like that. He snapped his fingers. I speak, gentlemen, of Texas, 1957. What if the Texans object? They have no choice. The time door is strictly a one-way passage. I saw to that. It will be utterly impossible for anyone in 1957 to re-enter our world of 2057. And now, the past awaits. He tossed aside his professorial robes. Under them, Cydwick Ohms wore an ancient and bizarre costume. Black riding boots, highly polished and trimmed in silver, wool chaps, a wide, jewel-studded belt with an immense buckle, a brightly checked shirt topped by a blazing red bandana. Briskly he snapped a tall 10-gallon hat on his head and stepped to the time door. Gripping an ebony handle, he tugged upward. The huge metal door oiled slowly back. "Time," said Cydwick Ohms simply, gesturing toward the gray nothingness beyond the door. The reporters and photographers surged forward, notebooks and cameras at the ready. "What if the door swings shut after you're gone?" one of them asked. "A groundless fear, boy," assured Ohms. "I've seen to it that the time door can never be closed. And now, goodbye, gentlemen. Or to use the proper colloquialism, so long, hombres." Ohms bowed from the waist, gave his 10-gallon hat a final tug, and took a single step forward. And did not disappear. He stood blinking. Then he swore, beat upon the unyielding wall of grayness with clenched fists, and fell back, panting, to his desk. "I failed," he moaned in a lost voice. "The C. Cydwick Ohms time door is a botch." He buried his head in trembling hands. The reporters and photographers began to file out. Suddenly, the professor raised his head. "Listen," he warned. A slow rumbling, muted with distance, emanated from the dense grayness of the time door. Faint yips and whoopings were distinct above the rumble. The sounds grew steadily, to 1,000 beating drums, to a rolling sea of thunder. Shrieking, the reporters and photographers scattered for the stairs. "Ah, another knotty problem to be solved," mused Professor Cydwick Ohms, swinging, with some difficulty, onto one of the 3,000 Texas steers stampeding into the laboratory.
Now that is a pretty great story. I want to thank Justin for reading this one for us today. Justin volunteers over at LibriVox.org. Yes, it is Our Amazing Stories. But just what does that mean? We have segments for your stories, one for strange moments in history, and even one that plays clips from the golden age of radio to take us back in time. So what makes this segment different? Our Amazing Stories looks at people who did amazing things. So sit back and listen to this incredible tale. On April 27, 1865, the United States experienced the worst maritime disaster in its history. A steamboat traveling up the Mississippi River bound for St. Louis exploded, killing 1,547 known people, 1,800 estimated that were on board. However, most of you probably have not heard this story. Now, usually we tell the story of someone doing something truly amazing. This time we uncover someone doing something amazingly dumb. The steamboat started on its journey in Vicksburg, Mississippi. The Sultana's captain, J. Cass Mason, had agreed to transport recently freed Union prisoners of war back to the North in exchange for a per-passenger fee. Hungry for money, Mason overloaded the 376-passenger Sultana with over 2,500 people, trusting that the waters of the Mississippi would be smooth for their journey. They were not. The river was at flood stage, a time of the year when the waters hover dangerously close to overflowing levels. Trees and other debris get pulled into the river by the high waters, creating a pretty treacherous trip upriver. Not to mention that this happened in April. Temperatures can drop very close to freezing that time of year. The Sultana made it a few miles north of Memphis before disaster struck. At 2 a.m, one of the steamboat's boilers exploded. That explosion caused a domino effect, in turn rupturing the 2 boilers right next to it. A fire broke out, immediately engulfing the rear of the ship. The 2 paddle wheels, those gigantic wheels that drove the ship, fell off, causing the boat to turn backward into the wind, which blew the flames up the entirety of the ship. Within minutes, the entire steamboat was ablaze. Now, despite the Civil War being over for just a few days, the steamboat's Union veteran passengers were rescued by Confederate veterans. The boat had still been passing through Confederate territory when it burst into flames, though they had been on different sides just days before. They risked their lives to help their fellow soldiers. The odd thing about all of this is that although the sinking of the Sultana is still the worst maritime disaster in U.S. history, resulting in roughly 300 more deaths than the sinking of the Titanic, there was hardly any news spread about it, due to the fact that even a larger tragedy had just occurred a few days before: the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. Ironically, the reason the Sultana had even been on the Mississippi was to deliver newspapers to the South. What were they reporting? The president's death. How about that? Well, that's it for this edition of Our Amazing Stories. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any ideas for stories for this segment or want to write one of your own, please let me know. I'd love to work with you on the project and want to hear any ideas that you might have. Use the contact page on the main website and we'll get it done. Thank you for listening to Our Amazing Stories. Guess what? That was episode number 548, and Brett Dixon, Candace, and Justin Daniels all made it happen for us. My thanks to you guys and your stories. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.